My stepbrother kicked down my bedroom door at 3 a.m. He screamed, "I want his room and I want it now." "Whose room?" I asked, half asleep, while my stepbrother Logan stood there breathing hard with his fists clenched. He was 17 and had moved in 6 months ago when my dad married his mom, Sheila, but he'd never acted violent before. My dad rushed in behind him looking panicked. "Logan, calm down and go back to bed." But Logan pushed past him into my room and started pulling my stuff off the shelves. "This should be mine." "He doesn't deserve it." He threw my textbooks on the floor and grabbed my laptop. Dad tried to grab him, but Logan was bigger and shoved him back. "Tell him the truth or I will." Dad's face went white, and Sheila appeared in the doorway in her robe looking scared. "Logan, please don't do this. We talked about waiting." "Waiting for what?" I stood up confused and worried because Logan was destroying my room at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. "I'm done waiting. It's been 6 months of watching him live in what should be mine." He kicked my desk chair and it hit the wall hard. "You promised me when we moved in." Sheila was crying now. "That's not what we promised. You're twisting everything." She tried to touch Logan's arm, but he jerked away. "You said once we were settled, things would change." He looked at me with pure hatred. "You said he was temporary." My stomach dropped. Temporary? What did that mean? Dad stepped between us. "Nobody said that. Logan, you need to leave right now." But Logan laughed, and it sounded unhinged. "You told Mom he was going to military school. That's why I agreed to move here." He pulled something from his pocket. "I have the emails." He waved papers around. "Branson Military Academy, starting January. Mom forwarded me everything." I grabbed the papers and saw email exchanges between Dad and Sheila from 3 months ago, discussing sending me away. "You were going to ship me off to military school?" Dad couldn't look at me. "It was just an option we discussed. Nothing was decided." Logan kicked my dresser. "Stop lying. You already paid the deposit. $20,000 non-refundable." He pulled out his phone showing a bank statement. "October 15th. Same day you told me I'd get the bigger room soon." Sheila was sobbing now. "We thought it would be better for everyone. You and Logan don't get along." "We didn't get along because Logan had been hostile since day one. Now I knew why. He'd been promised my room in my absence. Better for everyone? I'm a straight A student. I've never been in trouble." Logan laughed again. "That's the problem. Perfect little Matthew making me look bad." He grabbed my awards off the wall and threw them down. State chess champion, honor roll, Eagle Scout. Each one crashed to the floor. "Mom said you made me look like a failure just by existing." Dad finally found his voice. "We never said that. Logan is lying." But Sheila shook her head. "No, Richard. We need to be honest. We did discuss how Matthew's achievements were affecting Logan's self-esteem." She looked at me with this fake sympathy. "You're so accomplished, it's intimidating for Logan." Logan sat on my bed like he owned it. "See? Even she admits it. You make me look pathetic, so you have to go." He stretched out on my mattress. "This room has the better closet and the bigger window. Plus, it's farther from the master, so I can play games all night." Dad's phone rang, and he looked confused. "Why is your mother calling at 3 a.m.? My mom lived 2 states away, but somehow she was involved." He put it on speaker. "Richard, what's this about military school?" Mom's voice was furious. "Matthew just sent me emails about you enrolling him without telling me." Logan's face changed from smug to confused. "How does she know already?" I held up my phone. I forwarded everything to her the second I saw those emails. Mom kept going. "You need my signature for any school changes. It's in our custody agreement." Dad tried to explain. "Linda, we were just exploring options." But Mom wasn't having it. "Options? You paid $20,000. That's not exploring, that's deciding." She paused. "I'm driving down right now with my lawyer. We'll be there by 9. Logan stood up angry. "This doesn't change anything. I still get his room when he leaves for college. But I wasn't even a senior yet. I had 2 more years of high school." "That's 2 years away." Logan shrugged. "So? I'll wait. But this room is mine eventually." That's when Sheila said the thing that explained everything. "It was my idea," Sheila said through her tears. Logan threatened to move back with his father if things didn't change. I couldn't lose my son. Logan jumped off my bed so fast he almost tripped. "You're making me sound like some manipulative brat. You promised me this would happen." His face went red and his fists clenched again. "You said Matthew was temporary and I believed you." Sheila reached for him, but he backed away toward the door. "That's not fair, Logan. We were trying to help everyone." But Logan wasn't listening anymore. "Help everyone? You mean help me by getting rid of him? Just admit it, Mom. This whole plan was about keeping me happy." Richard stepped between them, trying to calm things down. "We were trying to blend the family. That's all this was about." I couldn't believe he was still making excuses after everything that just happened. Mom's lawyer will be here in 6 hours. You can explain it to her. Logan turned and punched the wall right next to my doorframe. His fist went straight through the drywall, leaving a hole the size of a grapefruit. Chunks of white plaster fell onto my carpet, and Logan shook his hand like it hurt. Richard just stood there staring at the hole without saying anything. Logan stormed past him into the hallway, and I heard his bedroom door slam so hard the walls shook. Sheila was crying harder now with her hands covering her face. This is all wrong. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Richard put his arm around her, but she pushed him away. Don't touch me. You said this would work. I grabbed my laptop off the floor where Logan had dropped it and checked that it wasn't broken. The screen had a small crack in the corner, but it still turned on. I picked up my important documents from the mess on the floor, including my birth certificate and social security card that I kept in my desk drawer. My hands were shaking as I gathered everything I might need. Matthew, please let us explain, Richard said, but I walked past him without looking. I went into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. The lock was flimsy, but it was better than nothing. I sat on the floor with my back against the door and my laptop on my knees. Through the door, I could hear Richard and Sheila arguing in harsh whispers. This is your fault. You pushed too hard, Richard said. Sheila's voice got louder. My fault? You agreed to everything. You signed the papers. Their voices moved down the hallway toward their bedroom. How are we going to explain this to Linda's lawyer? She's going to destroy us in court. Sheila said something I couldn't hear, and then their bedroom door closed. I pulled out my phone and saw 3 texts from Josh asking why I wasn't online for our usual gaming session. I typed out everything that just happened, starting with Logan kicking down my door. Josh responded in less than a minute. Holy crap, dude. I'm coming to get you right now. I told him to wait. My mom will be here by 9. I need to be here for whatever happens next. Josh sent back a bunch of angry emojis. Your dad is insane. Let me know if you need anything. I set my phone on the edge of the sink and tried to think about what would happen when Mom arrived. The bathroom floor was cold and hard, but I didn't want to go back to my room. I could hear movement in the house as Richard and Sheila walked around doing whatever they were doing. Around 5 in the morning, I heard a loud knock on the front door. Richard's footsteps rushed down the stairs and I heard him open the door. Is everything okay in there? The yelling woke up half the street. It was our neighbor from 2 houses down. Richard's voice sounded fake and cheerful. Oh, sorry about that. Just a family disagreement. Everything's fine now. The neighbor didn't sound convinced. It sounded pretty violent. I called the police about 3 hours ago when I heard all the banging and crashing. My stomach dropped. The police were coming. Richard tried to laugh it off. That really wasn't necessary, but thank you for your concern. The neighbor said something else I couldn't hear, and then the front door closed. Richard came back upstairs and knocked on the bathroom door. Matthew, the police are coming. You need to come out and not make this worse. I didn't answer him. About an hour later, I heard another knock at the front door, followed by deeper voices. Police. We got a call about a disturbance at this address. Richard let them in, and I heard 2 officers talking to him in the entryway. We need to speak with everyone in the house separately. I unlocked the bathroom door and came out. 2 officers stood in the hallway looking at the hole in the wall that Logan had punched. One of them was tall with gray hair, and the other was younger with dark skin. Are you Matthew? The older officer asked. I nodded and showed them into my room. They looked at the door hanging off its hinges, and all my stuff scattered across the floor. Can you tell us what happened here? I explained everything, starting with Logan kicking down my door at 3 in the morning. The younger officer took notes while I talked. He was mad because my dad was sending me to military school and Logan was supposed to get my room. The officers looked at each other. Where is Logan now? I pointed down the hall. In his room. He punched that hole in the wall on his way out. The older officer took photos of the damage with his phone. He photographed the broken door, the hole in the wall, my textbooks on the floor, and my awards that Logan had thrown down. We need to talk to Logan and your parents. They went down the hall and knocked on Logan's door. I heard him open it and start talking in this fake, calm voice. It was just a normal argument between brothers. Nothing serious. But the officers weren't buying it. Normal arguments don't result in kicked-in doors and holes in walls. They brought Logan out into the hallway and he wouldn't look at me. The younger officer showed him the photos. This is property damage and domestic disturbance. We're filing a report. Richard came upstairs looking panicked. Officers, please. Logan made a mistake, but pressing charges will ruin his future. He's applying to colleges next year. The older officer shook his head. That's not our decision to make, sir. We document what we see and file the report. The rest is up to the courts. He looked at Richard seriously. We strongly recommend family counseling. If we get called back here for another violent incident, someone will be arrested regardless of age. Richard's face went pale, and the officers finished taking their statements and left around 7:30. Richard tried to talk to me, but I went back into the bathroom and locked the door again. I heard him and Sheila arguing again about what they were going to tell Mom's lawyer. At 8:30, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked out the bathroom window and saw Mom getting out of her car with a woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase. Mom looked tired from driving all night, but her face was set and angry. I unlocked the bathroom door and went downstairs. Mom saw me and immediately pulled me into a tight hug. "Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you?" I shook my head and she held me tighter. The woman with her set down her briefcase and pulled out a camera. "I'm Veronica Richards. I'm your mother's lawyer. I need to document everything." Richard came down the stairs with Sheila behind him. Veronica started taking photos of the house before Richard could say anything. She photographed the hole in the wall, my destroyed door, and all the damage in my room. She took notes on her phone while Mom stayed close to me. "Matthew, tell me exactly what happened." I went through the whole story again while Veronica recorded everything. When I finished, she looked at Richard. "I need to see all the military school paperwork. Every document, every email, every receipt." Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but Sheila touched his arm. "Just give it to her, Richard. There's no point hiding it now." He went into his home office and came back with a folder. Veronica spread the papers across the dining room table and started photographing each page. There were the enrollment forms for Branson Military Academy with Richard's signature at the bottom. There was the payment receipt showing $20,000 paid on October 15th. And there at the bottom of the enrollment form was a signature line for both parents. Richard had signed his name and then signed Mom's name too without her permission. Mom's face turned red when she saw Richard had signed her name without permission. She pointed at the enrollment form where both signatures sat next to each other and told Richard this was forgery and completely illegal according to their custody agreement. Richard took a step back and said he hadn't actually forged anything yet, because the forms weren't submitted. Veronica flipped through the papers and found a calendar page showing the submission deadline was 2 weeks away, which meant Richard had been planning to fake Mom's signature and send everything in without her knowing. She held up the calendar and told Richard that planning to forge a signature was just as bad as actually doing it, and family court judges took this kind of deception very seriously when deciding custody arrangements. Richard's hands shook as he tried to explain that he just wanted to have everything ready in case they all agreed it was the best choice. Mom laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound, and she said there was zero chance she would ever agree to ship me off to military school so Logan could have my bedroom. Veronica took more photos of the calendar page and the incomplete signature section, while Mom kept her arm around my shoulders. Sheila wiped her eyes and said they were planning to sit down with me eventually and explain all the amazing opportunities at military school. She talked about leadership training and college preparation like she was reading from a brochure. Mom cut her off mid-sentence and said no boarding school was happening without her written consent, and that consent would never come. Veronica added that Richard and Sheila trying to move me across state lines for school required both parents to sign legal documents agreeing to the relocation. She explained that their divorce decree had specific language about major decisions affecting my education and living situation. Richard tried to argue that military school wasn't technically relocation since I'd come home for holidays. Veronica shook her head and pulled out her phone to show him the exact wording in the custody agreement that defined any school requiring overnight stays as a relocation. Sheila started crying harder and said they just wanted what was best for everyone in the family. Mom's voice got really quiet and cold when she said that shipping me away to make Logan comfortable wasn't what was best for me, and I was part of this family too. Logan came back into the room looking smug like nothing had changed. He leaned against the wall and said, all this legal stuff didn't really matter because I was leaving for college eventually anyway. He said in 2 years I'd be gone, and the room would be his no matter what Mom or her lawyer said about it. Something inside me snapped after listening to him act like my whole life was just an obstacle to his comfort. I told him he was a lazy, entitled brat who blamed everyone else for his own failures. My voice got louder as I said, that's exactly why he'd never accomplish anything worthwhile in his life. I told him my achievements had nothing to do with him looking bad. He made himself look bad by refusing to put in any effort, and then getting mad when other people succeeded. Logan's smug expression froze on his face. I kept going and said he could have my room and my awards and everything else, but it wouldn't change the fact that he was the problem, not me. Sheila gasped and told me I had no right to speak to her son that way. But I was done caring what she thought after she helped plan to get rid of me. Logan's face changed completely and his eyes got watery. He looked like I'd hit him even though I'd only said words. He turned and ran down the hallway to his room. The door slammed so hard the whole house shook. Sheila glared at me with pure hatred and said I was a cruel person who enjoyed making others feel small. Mom squeezed my shoulder and told Sheila that I had every right to defend myself after being betrayed by my own father. Veronica kept writing in her notebook like she was recording everything for court. She didn't look at me with judgment or disappointment, just kept taking notes about what happened. Richard stood there not saying anything, because what could he say after everything that came out? Sheila went after Logan down the hallway, and I heard her trying to comfort him through his bedroom door. Mom pulled me closer and whispered that I didn't do anything wrong by telling the truth. Veronica closed her notebook and looked directly at Richard. She said she was filing an emergency custody change based on his attempt to move me without proper consent. She added that the unsafe home environment Logan created with his violence made this an urgent situation. Richard's face went completely white, and he asked what that meant exactly. Veronica explained in her calm lawyer voice that emergency custody changes could result in him losing custody entirely, not just having his military school plan blocked. She said the family court judge would look at everything, including the forged signature plan, the violence, and the fact that he prioritized his new wife's demands over my safety. Richard sat down on the couch, looking like he might throw up. He said he never meant for things to go this far, and he thought he was solving a problem. Mom said the problem was that he chose Sheila and Logan over his own son, and now he had to face the legal results of that choice. Veronica pulled out more papers from her briefcase and started making notes about filing deadlines. She told Richard he should probably get his own lawyer, because this was going to family court whether he cooperated or not. Veronica spent the next 2 hours interviewing everyone separately while Mom and I waited in the living room. She took Sheila into the kitchen first, and I could hear Sheila's voice getting defensive as she answered questions. Then Veronica went upstairs to talk to Logan in his room. She was up there for almost 30 minutes. When she came back down, she had her recording device in her hand and told Mom she got both of them admitting important things on tape. She said Sheila confirmed the military school was her idea from the start, and she pressured Richard into agreeing. Logan admitted on recording that he was promised my room if I left. Veronica said this was building a really strong case for something called parental alienation. Mom asked what happened next, and Veronica said we'd take all this evidence to family court and request immediate custody change. She said Richard's actions were serious enough that the judge would probably grant Mom primary custody right away. Richard heard this from the couch and put his head in his hands. Sheila came out of the kitchen and asked if they could talk about this privately without lawyers. Veronica said no. Everything goes through legal channels now because Richard proved he couldn't be trusted to make decisions about my well-being. Mom told me to go pack everything important because we were leaving today. I went upstairs to my destroyed room and started putting clothes in suitcases. Mom came up to help me and we worked together, pulling stuff out of my closet and drawers. Richard appeared in the doorway watching us pack. He said my name quietly and tried to apologize. I didn't look at him or respond. Mom told him that all communication needed to go through Veronica from now on, and he needed to step away from the door. He just stood there looking defeated while we packed up my life. I grabbed my laptop and chess trophies that weren't broken. Mom carefully wrapped my state championship medal in a shirt so it wouldn't get damaged. We filled 3 suitcases and 4 boxes with everything I couldn't leave behind. Richard kept trying to talk, but Mom ignored him completely. She was protecting me the way he should have been protecting me all along. When we finished packing, we carried everything downstairs and set it by the front door. Veronica was waiting with a stack of papers in her hand. She walked over to Richard and handed him the documents. She said these were legal papers requiring him to appear in family court 2 weeks from today. Richard took the papers with shaking hands. Veronica said she was also including a request for a restraining order to keep Logan away from me until the custody hearing happened. Sheila started crying again and said we were treating her son like a criminal. Veronica said Logan committed property damage and created an unsafe environment. So yes, there would be legal protection in place. She told Sheila that Logan's actions had results, and those results included staying away from me. Richard asked if the restraining order was really needed. Mom said absolutely it was needed after Logan violently destroyed my room at 3 in the morning. Veronica added that the police report from this morning supported the restraining order request, and the judge would likely approve it. Sheila collapsed into a chair, sobbing about how unfair this was to Logan. I texted Josh and asked if he could come help us load the car. He showed up 15 minutes later and his eyes got wide when he saw all my stuff piled by the door. He helped us carry boxes and suitcases out to Mom's car. While we were loading the trunk, Josh whispered that everyone at the school was going to hear about this whole situation. I told him I didn't care anymore because living with the truth was better than living in a house where my own father tried to get rid of me. Josh said he understood and that I could stay at his place any time if I needed somewhere to go. We finished loading everything, and Josh gave me a quick hug before heading back to his car. Mom thanked him for helping, and he said to call him if I needed anything at all. Richard and Sheila watched from the doorway as we prepared to leave. Neither of them tried to stop us. Veronica put her briefcase in her car and said she'd follow us to make sure we got out okay. The drive back to Mom's place took 3 hours on the highway. We stopped at a diner for breakfast around 11 and slid into a booth by the window. Mom ordered coffee and pancakes while I got eggs and toast. She reached across the table and held my hand. She said I was staying with her permanently if she had anything to say about it. I felt relief wash over me knowing I wouldn't have to go back to that house. Veronica joined us and ordered just coffee. She spread out her notes on the table and explained what would happen over the next few weeks. She said Richard's actions gave us a very strong case for changed custody. She explained the judge would look at the forged signature plan, the unsafe environment, and the fact that Richard prioritized his new family over my needs. Mom asked about the timeline, and Veronica said the emergency hearing would happen within 2 weeks. She said based on everything that happened, she expected the judge to grant Mom primary custody immediately. I ate my breakfast while they talked about legal strategy. For the first time in months, I felt like someone was actually protecting me instead of trying to get rid of me. Mom's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building near downtown, and we had to carry everything up the stairs because the elevator was broken. She kept apologizing about the size, but I didn't care because it felt safe in a way Richard's house never did after Logan moved in. The guest room was small with just enough space for a bed and dresser, but Mom said we'd make it work. She hung my state chess championship certificate on the wall first thing and promised we'd go back for my other awards once the legal stuff got sorted out. Richard would have to let us get my belongings, or Veronica would file contempt charges, and he'd be in even more trouble with the judge. I unpacked my clothes while Mom made up the bed with fresh sheets that smelled like lavender detergent. She said this was my permanent room now, and I could decorate it however I wanted. The window looked out over a parking lot instead of the backyard I was used to, but I could see the sky, and that was enough. We ordered pizza for dinner and ate it sitting on her couch watching old movies neither of us really paid attention to. I called the school counselor Monday morning before classes started and explained I needed to transfer immediately because of a family emergency. Amelia asked if I was safe, and I told her yes. I was living with my mom now and wouldn't be coming back to my old school. She said she understood and would help get my records transferred fast so I wouldn't fall behind in my junior year. We spent 20 minutes on the phone going over my schedule, and she promised to contact my new school's counselor to coordinate everything. She asked if I needed to talk about what happened, and I said maybe later when things settled down. Amelia said her door was always open even after I transferred and to call anytime. Richard started calling Mom's phone around noon that day, and she let every call go straight to voicemail like Veronica told her to. I could see her phone lighting up over and over on the kitchen counter while we ate lunch. One message had Richard yelling about how we couldn't just take me away without discussing it first. Another message had him crying and saying he was sorry, and could we please talk about this like adults. Mom played each voicemail on speaker so Veronica could hear them, and then deleted them after Veronica saved copies as evidence. She said Richard had no right to demand anything after what he tried to do. My phone buzzed with a text from Sheila around dinner time, and it was this long message about how I misunderstood everything. She wrote that they were only trying to help Logan feel included in the family, and that sending me to military school wasn't about getting rid of me. She said Logan struggled with his self-worth, and seeing my accomplishments every day made him feel worse about himself. She wrote that they thought giving me new opportunities would be good for everyone, and I was being selfish by not understanding their perspective. I screenshot the whole text and sent it to Veronica, who responded immediately saying this was more evidence of them putting Logan's feelings over my actual well-being and legal rights. Veronica said Sheila basically admitted in writing that they planned to remove me from my home to make Logan feel better about himself. I started at my new school on Wednesday, and it was bigger than my old one with more students in the hallways. The chess team captain found me at lunch after someone told her about my state championship. Piper had short dark hair and wore a hoodie with a chess knight on it. She said they practiced every Thursday after school, and I should definitely join. Having something normal and achievement-based helped me feel less like my whole world just exploded 2 days ago. Piper introduced me to the other team members, and they all seemed excited to have someone with competition experience. Josh texted me Thursday night with screenshots of Logan's social media posts. Logan wrote cryptic stuff about fake family members who abandon you when things get hard. He posted about betrayal, and how some people only care about themselves. He was clearly trying to make himself look like the victim in all this. Josh said everyone at our old school was talking about what happened, and most people thought Logan was crazy for kicking down my door at 3 a.m. I forwarded all the screenshots to Veronica, who added them to her growing file of evidence showing Logan's behavior and mindset. She said the post demonstrated his ongoing hostility and supported our request for the restraining order. 2 days before the custody hearing, Richard's brother called Mom asking if we could settle this privately. Mom put him on speaker, so Veronica could hear the whole conversation. Brock said Richard was really struggling with everything, and maybe we could work something out without involving the court. Veronica explained firmly that Richard's actions required legal intervention to protect me. She said forging signatures and planning to relocate a minor without consent wasn't something you could just talk through over coffee. Brock got quiet for a minute, then admitted Richard told him the truth about why he agreed to the military school plan. Sheila had given Richard an ultimatum about choosing between his new family and me. She said Logan was miserable living in the same house as me, and something had to change, or she was leaving and taking Logan with her. Richard chose to keep his wife happy instead of protecting his own son. Mom's face went red when she heard this, and she started yelling at Brock about how Richard threw away our relationship for someone else's insecure teenager. Veronica had to calm her down and remind her that Brock was actually helping by admitting all this. Brock said he told Richard the plan was wrong. but Richard wouldn't listen because he was terrified of losing Sheila. The custody hearing happened on a Tuesday morning at the county courthouse downtown. Mom and I got there early and met Veronica in the lobby. Richard showed up with a lawyer in a suit who carried a briefcase full of papers. Richard wouldn't look at me when we walked past each other to our separate sides of the courtroom. The judge was a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back tight. Richard's lawyer stood up first and tried to argue that military school would be good for my character development. He said young men benefit from structure and discipline, and that Branson Military Academy had an excellent reputation. Veronica stood up and destroyed his argument by presenting my transcript showing straight A's in all advanced classes. She showed my athletic achievements, including varsity track and my Eagle Scout certificate. She presented my spotless disciplinary record with 0 detentions or suspensions in my entire school history. She asked the judge what character correction was needed for a student who excelled academically, contributed to his community, and never caused any problems. Richard's lawyer didn't have a good answer for that. The judge called Logan to testify about what happened at 3 in the morning. Logan wore khakis and a button-up shirt trying to look responsible, but his hands shook when he sat in the witness chair. He tried to say the whole thing was just a normal argument between brothers that got a little heated. He claimed he only wanted to talk to me about sharing the room better, and things got out of hand. Veronica pulled out the police report with photos of my destroyed door hanging off its hinges. She showed pictures of my belongings scattered all over the floor and the hole Logan punched in the wall. She showed photos of my broken awards and the damaged furniture. The judge looked disturbed when she saw the evidence of Logan's rage. She asked Logan directly if he considered kicking down doors and destroying property a normal conversation. Logan mumbled something about being frustrated, and the judge told him to speak up. He admitted he got angry, but said it was because everyone always took my side. The judge looked at him for a long moment, then told him to step down. Sheila took the stand next, and her hands shook when she placed them on the wooden rail in front of her. Veronica stood up holding a folder full of papers and asked her to explain why she thought military school was the right choice for me. Sheila said she only wanted to help her son feel less inadequate around someone as accomplished as me. She talked about how Logan struggled with self-esteem and how my achievements made him feel like a failure. Veronica let her talk for a few minutes, then asked if she ever considered how sending me away would affect me personally. Sheila went quiet and looked down at her hands. She admitted she hadn't really thought about my feelings because she was so focused on fixing Logan's problems. The judge leaned forward and asked Sheila directly why Logan's self-esteem issues should result in my displacement from my home and school. Sheila didn't have a good answer and just repeated that she thought it would help everyone. The judge asked how removing a straight A student from his stable environment helped anyone except Logan. Sheila started crying again and said she made a mistake. Veronica showed her the emails where she told Richard that I made Logan look pathetic just by existing. Sheila tried to explain that she was just venting frustration, but Veronica read the exact words out loud for everyone to hear. The courtroom went silent when people heard how Sheila described me as a problem that needed to be solved rather than a kid who deserved protection. Richard took the stand after Sheila, and he looked like he aged 10 years in the past 2 weeks. His lawyer asked him to explain his side of the story, but Richard just shook his head and said he wanted to tell the complete truth. He talked about how Sheila pressured him for months about Logan's unhappiness in our house. She told him every day that Logan was miserable living in my shadow, and something had to change. Richard admitted he chose the path of least resistance instead of addressing Logan's behavioral issues or setting boundaries with his new wife. He said he was terrified of losing Sheila and going through another divorce, so he agreed to her plan. Veronica asked him if he understood that he failed me as a father. Richard's voice broke and he said yes, he understood completely. He looked at me for the first time during the hearing and apologized with tears running down his face. He said he chose his own comfort over my well-being, and there was no excuse for that. The judge asked him why he didn't discuss the military school plan with Mom before paying the deposit. Richard admitted he knew Mom would never agree, so he planned to forge her signature and present it as a done deal. He said he thought if he could just get me enrolled, then everyone would accept it and move on. The judge looked disgusted and told him that was kidnapping under state law. The judge took a 15-minute break to review all the evidence and testimony. Mom held my hand the whole time and whispered that everything would be okay. Veronica looked confident, but I felt sick to my stomach waiting to hear what would happen. When the judge came back, she didn't waste any time. She awarded Mom primary custody immediately, with Richard getting only supervised visitation until he completed family counseling. Richard looked devastated, but he didn't argue or try to fight the decision. Sheila stood up angry and said the judge wasn't being fair to Logan's struggles. The judge told her to sit down and be quiet, or she'd be removed from the courtroom. Sheila stormed out anyway, slamming the door behind her. The judge said Richard's actions showed he couldn't be trusted to make decisions in my best interest. She said attempting to relocate a minor without the other parent's consent was serious and showed poor judgment. She ordered Richard to complete 6 months of counseling before any custody modifications would be considered. Mom squeezed my hand tight, and I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders, knowing I didn't have to go back to that house. After the hearing ended, Veronica pulled Richard's lawyer aside in the hallway. I watched through the courtroom door as they talked for about 20 minutes. Veronica came back and told us she negotiated the return of the $20,000 military school deposit. Richard agreed to put that money into my college fund instead of keeping it or giving it back to Sheila. It wasn't enough to fix what he did, but it was something concrete that showed he was trying to make amends. Mom thanked Veronica for everything and wrote her a check for her legal fees. Veronica told me I was a brave kid for standing up for myself and that I should be proud. Richard tried to approach us in the parking lot, but Mom told him all future communication goes through Veronica per the court order. He nodded and walked away looking broken. I felt bad for him for about 2 seconds, then remembered he tried to ship me off to military school so his stepson could have my room. The next month passed in a blur of settling into my new routine with Mom. Her apartment was smaller than Richard's house, but it felt safe and stable. I transferred to the local high school in her district, and the guidance counselor helped me get caught up in all my classes. Mom enrolled me in therapy with Amelia, who specialized in family trauma and adolescent issues. Amelia was in her 30s with dark hair and a calm voice that made it easy to talk about difficult things. Our first session focused on processing the betrayal without letting it poison my ability to trust people. She explained that Richard's weakness didn't define my worth, and his bad choices were about his character flaws, not my value as his son. That helped me understand I didn't do anything wrong by being good at things. Amelia taught me techniques for managing anxiety and anger when I thought about what Richard and Sheila did. She said it was normal to feel hurt and angry, but I shouldn't let those feelings control my future relationships. Mom came to some sessions with me, and we talked about rebuilding our relationship after years of split custody. Mom admitted she should have fought harder for primary custody years ago when she first noticed Richard prioritizing his new family over me. Josh started visiting on weekends, and we'd play video games or go to the movies like nothing changed. He told me Logan got suspended from the school for fighting with someone who asked about the family drama. Apparently, Logan punched a kid in the cafeteria who made a comment about his mom trying to get rid of his stepbrother. Josh said Logan's anger issues were getting worse now that his plan to get my room failed, and he was facing consequences for his violent behavior. The school put him in anger management counseling, but according to Josh, he just sat there refusing to participate. I felt a little bad for Logan because his whole life was falling apart, but then I remembered he kicked down my door at 3 a.m. and destroyed my stuff. Some people create their own problems, then get mad when they face consequences. Josh also told me Richard moved out of the big house into a smaller apartment because he couldn't afford it anymore without Mom's child support payments. Sheila was furious about the downsize and blamed Richard for losing the custody case. Their marriage was falling apart just months after they caused all this damage to my life. Richard started sending letters to Mom's apartment apologizing and asking if we could slowly rebuild our relationship. The first letter was 5 pages long, going through everything he did wrong and how sorry he was. Mom read them first, then left it up to me to decide if and when I was ready to respond. I wasn't ready yet, because trust takes years to build, and he destroyed ours in one night for someone else's kid. Amelia said I didn't owe Richard forgiveness on any timeline, and I should only engage when I felt genuinely ready. She warned me that some people apologize to make themselves feel better, rather than to actually repair the relationship. I kept the letters in a folder, but didn't read most of them. Mom said that was okay, and I could throw them away if I wanted. Part of me wanted to read them to understand why he did it, but a bigger part of me didn't care about his excuses anymore. Actions matter more than words, and his actions showed me exactly where I ranked in his priorities. My new school had a strong chess program, and the team captain Piper invited me to compete in a regional tournament 2 months after I transferred. Piper was a senior with short dark hair, and she'd won state championships 3 years in a row. She heard about my previous wins and wanted me on the team for the spring season. The tournament was at a college campus about an hour away, and Mom drove me there early Saturday morning. I won my first 3 matches easily, then faced a tough opponent in the semifinals. The game went on for almost 2 hours before I found a winning strategy. When I won, Mom cheered louder than anyone in the room, and I realized I had everything I needed right here without Richard's house or approval. I placed second overall, which felt amazing, because I was succeeding on my own merit in a new environment. Piper congratulated me and said I'd definitely make varsity next year. The trophy sat on my desk in Mom's apartment, and every time I looked at it, I felt proud of myself for not letting Richard's betrayal destroy my confidence. 3 months after the custody change, Brock reached out again through a text message to Mom. He said Richard and Sheila separated because she blamed him for losing the custody case. Richard apparently stood up to her manipulation after months of therapy, but it came too late to save his relationship with me. Brock said Richard was living alone in a studio apartment and going to counseling 3 times a week. He asked if there was any chance I'd consider talking to Richard once his supervised visitation ended. Mom showed me the message, and I told her I wasn't sure yet. Brock sent another text saying Richard understood he might never earn back my trust, but he wanted the chance to try. I didn't respond because I needed more time to process everything. Amelia said it was healthy to take my time and not rush into reconciliation, just because Richard was finally doing the work he should have done months ago. She reminded me that real change takes consistent action over time, not just a few months of therapy after getting caught. The family therapist assigned by the court finally scheduled our first session for a Tuesday afternoon. Mom drove me to the office building downtown and waited in the lobby while I went in. The therapist was a woman in her 50s named Dr. Smith, who specialized in custody disputes and family reconciliation. Richard was already there, sitting in one of the chairs, looking nervous. Dr. Smith explained the ground rules about respectful communication and giving each person space to talk without interruption. She asked Richard to start by explaining why he thought we were there. Richard cried through most of his explanation, admitting everything he did wrong. He talked about choosing Sheila over me and planning to send me away without Mom's consent. He admitted he was a coward who took the easy path instead of being a real father. Dr. Smith asked him what he hoped to accomplish through these sessions. Richard said he wanted to prove he could be better and maybe earn back a small piece of my trust someday. I sat there listening but didn't offer forgiveness yet, because I needed him to understand that some betrayals can't be fixed with tears and apologies. Dr. Smith turned to me and asked what I needed from Richard moving forward. I told her I needed consistent action over time, not just words and emotions. I said if Richard wanted any relationship with me, he'd have to prove through years of changed behavior that I mattered to him. Richard nodded and said he understood that was fair. The session ended with Dr. Smith scheduling us for weekly meetings over the next 3 months to work on communication and trust building. A week after the court-ordered therapy session ended, Logan sent me a text message that I didn't expect. The message was long and actually sounded real instead of the fake stuff people usually write when they're forced to apologize. He admitted he'd been jealous of everything I accomplished since the day he moved in, and that watching me succeed made him feel like garbage about himself. He said his therapist was helping him understand that tearing me down wouldn't make him better, and that his anger problems came from his own insecurity, not from anything I did to him. He wrote that he was working on himself in therapy twice a week and trying to figure out why he needed to destroy other people to feel okay about his own life. The apology seemed genuine, but I didn't care anymore because too much damage had been done. I screenshot the message and showed it to Mom, who read it carefully, then asked what I wanted to do about it. I told her I appreciated that Logan was getting help, but I wasn't interested in having any kind of relationship with him, not now and probably not ever. She nodded and said that was completely fair, and I didn't owe Logan forgiveness just because he finally realized he'd been awful. I deleted the message without responding because Logan needed to learn that apologies don't erase actions, and some bridges get burned beyond repair. Amelia said in our next session that my choice to not engage with Logan was healthy boundary setting and showed I understood my own worth. 2 weeks later, Richard asked through his supervised visitation coordinator if I'd consider doing monthly dinners once his supervised period ended in 3 months. The coordinator passed along Richard's request during one of our check-ins and said Richard wanted to rebuild our relationship slowly if I was willing. I told the coordinator I needed time to think about it and discuss it with Mom and Amelia before making any decisions. That night at dinner, I brought it up with Mom, and she listened carefully while I explained what Richard was asking for. She said the choice was completely mine, and she'd support whatever I decided, whether that meant giving Richard a chance or cutting him off entirely. I met with Amelia the next day, and we talked through what monthly dinners might look like and what boundaries I'd need to set. Amelia helped me understand that I could try rebuilding a relationship with Richard without committing to full forgiveness or pretending everything was okay. After a week of thinking it over, I told the coordinator I'd agree to try monthly dinners once the supervised visitation ended. I made it clear through the coordinator that rebuilding trust would take years, not months, and Richard would have to prove through consistent actions over time that I actually mattered to him. The coordinator said Richard cried when he heard my answer and promised he understood the conditions. My first report card from the new school arrived in November, and every single grade was an A, just like always. I made the honor roll again, which felt amazing, because it proved that Richard's claim about military school being necessary for my development was complete garbage. I'd been succeeding just fine without his house or his rules or his new family dragging me down. Mom picked up the report card from the school office, and when she got home, she hugged me tight and said she was proud of who I was and who I was becoming. She took the report card to a frame shop downtown and had it professionally framed with a gold border, then hung it in the living room right above the couch. Every time I walked past it, I felt this surge of pride because I'd proven to myself that I could thrive anywhere as long as I had people who actually supported me. Piper congratulated me when she saw my name on the honor roll list posted outside the main office and said I was making the chess team look good. The other team members started asking me for study tips, and I realized I'd built a whole new community of friends who valued achievement instead of resenting it. Josh called me one Saturday afternoon in December with news about Richard that I wasn't expecting. He said Richard sold the house because it was too big and too full of bad memories after Sheila moved out following their separation. Richard apparently downsized to a small apartment across town and was working on himself in therapy 3 times a week instead of the court-mandated twice-weekly sessions. Josh said Richard looked different now, thinner and older, like the guilt was eating him alive from the inside. He mentioned that Richard asked about me constantly and kept a photo of us from before the wedding on his apartment wall. I listened to everything Josh told me, but I didn't feel much of anything because Richard's suffering didn't undo what he'd done to me. The fact that he was finally doing the work he should have done months ago was progress, but it didn't erase the betrayal or magically fix our broken relationship. I thanked Josh for keeping me updated and told him I appreciated him staying neutral in all the family drama. Josh said he'd always be my friend no matter what happened between me and Richard, which meant more to me than he probably realized. 6 months after everything exploded that night in my bedroom, I had my first dinner with Richard at a restaurant downtown. Mom drove me there and parked in the lot where she sat reading a book and waiting in case I needed to leave early. I walked into the restaurant and found Richard already sitting at a corner booth looking nervous and older than I remembered. He stood up when he saw me and looked like he wanted to hug me, but I just slid into the booth across from him instead. The first 10 minutes were painfully awkward with both of us staring at our menus and making small talk about nothing important. Then I decided to stop pretending everything was fine and told Richard exactly how his betrayal affected me, how it shattered my ability to trust him and made me question every good memory we'd ever had together. I explained that learning he'd planned to send me away without even talking to me first made me feel disposable and worthless, like I was just an inconvenience he needed to eliminate. Richard listened without interrupting, and I watched tears run down his face while I spoke. When I finished, he didn't make excuses or try to minimize the damage he'd caused. He just sat there crying and nodding. He said he heard everything I told him and understood why I felt that way. The dinner lasted 2 hours, and by the end we'd covered everything from the military school plan, to his failed marriage, to Sheila, to the custody battle that changed everything. Before I left the restaurant, Richard admitted he was a coward who chose the easy path instead of protecting his son when it mattered most. He said he knew he might never fully earn back my trust, and he'd have to live with that reality for the rest of his life. I told him that was accurate, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise just to make him feel better. I explained I was willing to see if he could be better going forward, but our relationship would never be what it was before he destroyed it. Richard accepted that without argument, and thanked me for even giving him the chance to try. We agreed to meet again in a month and see how it went from there. When I got back to Mom's car, she asked how it went, and I told her it was terrible and painful, but maybe necessary. She drove us home and we stopped for ice cream on the way because we both needed something sweet after all that heaviness. My sessions with Amelia continued through the winter, and she helped me work through layers of anger I didn't even know I was carrying. During one particularly hard session in January, I broke down crying and admitted I was actually happier living with Mom full-time than I'd been in years at Richard's house. Amelia asked me to explore that feeling, and I realized the stability and unconditional support Mom provided was what I needed all along. Richard's house had been becoming toxic even before the military school revelation, with Sheila's constant comparisons between me and Logan and the tension that filled every room. Amelia helped me understand that recognizing I was better off didn't make me a bad person or mean I was glad everything fell apart the way it did. She explained that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to better situations we never would have found otherwise. I started thinking about my life in terms of before and after, with the 3 a.m. confrontation as the dividing line between who I used to be and who I was becoming. In February, a new student transferred to our school, whose parents were going through a brutal divorce, and Piper asked if I'd be willing to talk to him about navigating family court stuff. I met with the kid whose name was Philippe during lunch, and shared everything I learned about advocating for yourself and knowing your legal rights when parents try to make decisions without your input. Felipe listened carefully and took notes on his phone while I explained how custody agreements work and what happens when one parent violates court orders. I gave him the name of Mom's lawyer, Veronica, and explained how having good legal representation made all the difference in my case. Over the next few weeks, I ended up helping 3 more students whose families were falling apart, and Piper said, "The idea stuck with me because helping other kids felt meaningful in a way my chess tournaments and honor roll achievements never had." I mentioned it to Mom and she got excited, saying she could totally see me as a lawyer fighting for kids who needed someone in their corner. Richard continued showing up for our monthly dinners through the spring, and slowly proved he was serious about being better. Each dinner was less awkward than the last, and we started having actual conversations instead of just painful confessions and apologies. He told me about his therapy progress and the things he was learning about himself, and I shared updates about school and chess and my new friends. I maintained firm boundaries about what I would and wouldn't tolerate, making it clear that any dishonesty or manipulation would end our reconnection immediately. Richard respected those boundaries without pushing back, and accepted that our relationship existed on my terms now, not his. Mom supported whatever level of relationship I was comfortable with and never pushed me to forgive faster than I was ready. She said healing happens at its own pace, and nobody gets to rush that process for their own convenience. By April, our dinners started feeling less like obligation and more like genuine attempts to rebuild something from the ruins of what we'd lost. By the end of junior year, I was thriving in ways I never expected after everything that happened. My grades stayed perfect with straight A's in every class, and I made honor roll again, proving to myself that I could succeed anywhere. I won 3 more chess tournaments, including a regional competition that qualified me for state finals. My friendship circle expanded beyond just Josh to include Piper and the other chess team members, and the kids I'd helped with their family legal stuff. Mom's apartment felt like home in a way Richard's house never quite had, stable and safe and full of unconditional support. I never had to worry about being sent away, or making someone else look bad just by existing. Richard's betrayal taught me that I was strong enough to stand up for myself, even when the people who should protect me failed to do their job. I learned that real family means people who choose you every single day, not just when it's convenient for them or when keeping you around doesn't complicate their other relationships. I discovered I could survive having my world torn apart and come out stronger on the other side. Most importantly, I understood now that my worth wasn't dependent on other people's ability to see it, and nobody could take away what I'd built through my own effort and determination.